Get out. This lounge isn't for people like you." The words hit the marble lobby like a hammer. Not whispered, not hidden. Spoken loud enough for every client, every clerk, every security guard within earshot. The branch manager's voice carried authority, but also something uglier, contempt. And his hand hovered near her shoulder as if he owned not just the bank, but the right to decide who belonged inside it. Danielle Hayes sat in silence. Her dress, a flame of orange against the gray leather chair, caught the sterile light. Her ponytail pulled tight, her gaze locked forward. She didn't flinch, she didn't answer, but silence is never neutral. In that moment, silence was a blade sharp, deliberate, dangerous. Gasps rippled across the room. A woman in pearls muttered, "Did he just say that?" A teenager clutched his phone tighter, thumb hovering over record. The junior clerk at the far desk froze, eyes wide, her screen still glowing with Danielle's account number. The manager leaned in, smug. "You think you can sit here dressed like that, asking for millions? Not today." His tie twitched as he straightened it, his lips curling into the kind of smile built on unchecked power. Danielle's collar was still ruffled from where he had brushed too close. She smoothed it once, slowly. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She wasn't going anywhere. The room tightened, air charged like a courtroom about to hear a verdict. Whispers spread like sparks on dry ground. "She doesn't look like she belongs. Why would they treat her like that? This feels wrong." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Danielle Hayes. The manager's voice cracked again, sharper this time, as if volume could bury guilt. "Security's coming. You don't belong here and you're not leaving with a cent." Danielle's eyes lifted to his, not with rage, not with fear, but with something colder, patience sharpened into steel. She had heard these words before. In banks, in hotels, at airports, always the same. You don't belong. But this time, it would end differently. Because Danielle Hayes wasn't just another client. She was the storm the institution had invited by underestimating her. And as the first phone camera lit red in the corner, the storm had already begun. That morning, Danielle Hayes had walked into Summit Financial alone. No assistant trailing her. No driver waiting at the curb. No designer handbag swinging from her wrist. Just a simple orange dress, clean lines, tailored but modest. Low heels that clicked softly against the marble floor. Hair pulled back in a ponytail sharp enough to frame her face in focus. She looked like any professional woman stepping in for an appointment. And that was exactly the point. Because Danielle wasn't just a professional. She was the chair of Hayes Capital, a global investment firm on the verge of pouring $900 million into the very institution now trying to push her out. But no one in that lobby knew. Not yet. She had chosen this entrance carefully. Years ago, she learned something most executives never test. People reveal their true character when they believe you hold no power. So she came without the markers of wealth. No chivalry, no entourage, just presence. And what presence it was. A flame of orange cutting through gray suits and black blazers. A quiet gravity that made strangers glance twice, then look away before they could explain why. But to the manager, none of it mattered. To him, she was just another woman who didn't fit the picture he wanted in this space. Danielle had asked for one thing, access to the private client lounge. Not a favor, not a privilege, a right tied to the numbers sitting quietly in her account. The teller had waved her through without hesitation, eyes on the screen. But the moment she sat down, the atmosphere shifted. A storm disguised as routine. The manager arrived. The words were spoken, the insult delivered, and now the room was split in two, those who knew nothing, and those who knew enough to sense something was wrong. At the corner of the lounge, a student with a backpack whispered, "She's calm, too calm." Near the espresso bar, a retiree frowned, murmuring, "I've seen that look before, someone holding back fire." Danielle remained still, her hands folded in her lap, posture unbending. The orange dress against the leather seat wasn't armor, but it might as well have been. Because in that moment, she wasn't trying to prove herself. She was waiting, watching, measuring how far they would go before they realized who they were dealing with. And the lobby, with its polished floors and quiet whispers, had already become more than a bank. It had become a test. One Danielle Hayes had no intention of failing. "Where did you get that kind of money?" The question snapped from the lips of a junior banker. voice flat but eyes sharp. He stood near the desk, arms crossed, tone less inquiry and more accusation. Before Danielle could answer, another voice cut in, this one from a man in a tailored gray suit strolling past with a smirk. "Sweetheart, you sure you're in the right place? Looks more like you wandered in off the street." He let the words linger, laughing under his breath, as if humiliation were sport. The crowd shifted. A few chuckled nervously. Others looked away, unwilling to be seen agreeing or disagreeing. Danielle remained still, not a muscle twitched. She blinked once, slowly, as if to mark the insult and file it neatly away. At the far end, the junior banker pressed again. "That amount doesn't make sense. Not with you. Not dressed like that." He gestured loosely at her orange dress as though fabric proved fraud. A client waiting nearby whispered, "That's crossing a line." But he didn't say it loud enough to matter. The manager smiled thinly, encouraged. "She can't verify her funds. She doesn't belong here. We'll sort this out when security arrives." Whispers rippled across the marble floor. She must be faking. Could be stolen. Why else would they question her? Every sentence fell like a stone, one after another, piling up against her silence. But Danielle's silence wasn't surrender. It was patience. And patience, in her hands, was power. She folded her hands tighter in her lap, eyes still forward, as though none of it pierced her. Her calm was infuriating to those who wanted a reaction. The man in the gray suit leaned closer, sneering. "You want advice? Pawn shops down the street. Might be more your speed." He slid a folded note across the table. It stopped at her heels. Gasps rose from the onlookers. A woman clutched her handbag. A teenager mouthed, "No way." Danielle didn't bend to pick it up. She didn't even glance down. Instead, she lifted her chin an inch higher, eyes steady as stone. The atmosphere thickened. The air no longer carried quiet luxury, it carried judgment, suspicion, contempt. And through it all, the woman in orange sat unbroken, letting the storm close in, letting every word expose the institution more than it exposed her. Because Danielle Hayes knew something no one else in that lobby did. Storms burn out. But truth waits. And her truth was about to arrive. The paper note still rested at her feet, unopened, unacknowledged. The insult was there, waiting like a trap, but Danielle Hayes refused to bend toward it. Instead, she leaned back into the leather chair, folding her hands once more. Her breathing stayed calm, each inhale steady, each exhale measured. Not a flicker of anger, not a flash of defense. Her silence filled the space. It wasn't absence, it was presence. And slowly, the room began to notice. A young man in a hoodie finally tapped his phone, red record light glowing in the corner. His voice trembled as he muttered, "This needs to be seen." 2 seats away, an older woman in pearls shook her head sharply. "This is foul," she whispered, louder this time. A few others nodded, emboldened by her words. The manager heard it. His jaw tightened. "You're disrupting my branch," he barked at Danielle, though she hadn't said a word. "You want to sit there like a queen? Fine, but security will drag you out." Danielle turned her head slowly toward him, eyes steady, lips pressed. She still didn't answer. And the silence again was sharper than any retort. For some, the quiet unnerved. The junior banker fidgeted with his tie, muttering, "She should have reacted by now." A client near the espresso bar whispered to his wife, "That's composure. Look at her." The wife whispered back, "That's power." But for the man in the gray suit, the silence was a challenge. He leaned on the desk, voice dripping with mockery. "Cat got your tongue, or are you just waiting for your fairy tale to end?" His laugh echoed against the marble like a slap. Danielle blinked once, slowly, then looked past him as if he were dust on glass. The crowd was dividing now. Some smirked with the manager, convinced Danielle was a fraud. Others shifted uncomfortably, realizing the room itself was revealing more than she ever had. And still, she sat, orange dress bright against the sterile gray, posture unbroken, gaze unyielding. Her silence became a mirror, reflecting the ugliness of every accusation. At the far edge of the room, a trainee banker whispered to herself, "I saw her name in the system." Her hands shook. She wanted to speak, but fear pinned her to the desk. The manager's voice rose again, anger flaring. "You hear that? Not a word. Because she has nothing. She's nothing." But those who watched closely saw the truth. Danielle's silence wasn't emptiness. It was strategy. It was patience. It was the calm before revelation. And the longer she stayed silent, the louder the room betrayed itself. The hush of the marble lobby was breaking. What had started as whispers was now spreading like cracks in glass. The boy in the hoodie raised his phone higher, angling it so the red light glowed for all to see. His voice shook, but the words carried. They're throwing her out for no reason. Everyone's watching. A woman in pearls, the same one who muttered before, finally pushed herself to her feet. "This is foul," she said again, louder this time. Her words cut through the lobby. Two men near the espresso machine turned, eyes narrowing at the staff. Even a clerk at the far desk froze mid-typing, her lips pressed thin, torn between duty and conscience. The manager bristled at the sound of dissent. "You people need to mind your business," he snapped. His voice cracked sharp against the marble walls. "She doesn't belong here. End of discussion." But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because once a witness speaks, others follow. A man in a business suit, mid-40s, polished, the kind who looked like the lobby belonged to him, stood slowly. "I don't know what's going on here," he said carefully, "but I've seen enough to know it looks wrong." Murmurs rippled. A young woman clutched her purse tighter. A father with a toddler on his hip whispered to his wife, "This isn't right." Daniela sat still. She didn't move, didn't nod, didn't seize the moment. She let the room speak. Her silence gave their voices weight. And those voices were gaining momentum. The man in the gray suit rolled his eyes, trying to reclaim the stage. "Come on," he said, smirking at the crowd. "You really think she has millions sitting in this place? Look at her. Look at what she's wearing." He waved a dismissive hand at Danielle's dress, as though fabric could erase fact. But the crowd didn't laugh this time. Not now. The woman in pearls fired back. "And what exactly does money look like, sir?" Her voice, sharp and steady, landed harder than his sneer. The gray-suited man faltered. For the first time, his smirk thinned. At the front desk, the trainee banker whispered again, this time louder, trembling but audible. "I saw her name in the system this morning. She's a client." The manager spun, eyes blazing. "Quiet, that's not your place." But the words rang too late. Several nearby customers had heard. Gasps followed, then a voice from the back. "Let her speak." And suddenly the power in the room shifted. What began as silence was becoming testimony. Danielle Hayes still hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. Every second of her stillness was fuel for the fire spreading across the lobby. Witnesses were no longer just bystanders. They were participants. And in their rising voices, the truth was beginning to break free. The doors at the far end of the lobby swung open. Polished shoes struck the marble in sharp rhythm. A taller man, mid-50s, silver tie pinned perfectly, strode in with the kind of confidence that believed it owned the air. The staff straightened at once. "Mr. Callahan," the manager said quickly, relief spilling into his tone. Callahan didn't glance at him. His eyes went straight to Danielle. Then the corners of his mouth curved not into a smile, but into something colder. "This is the disruption?" he asked. His voice was calm, but calm in the way thunder is calm before it breaks. The manager nodded, eager. "She's unverified, refusing protocol, making a scene." Callahan adjusted his cufflinks, then stepped closer to Danielle. He looked down at her, then around at the crowd, and finally back again. And with a voice meant for everyone to hear, he said, "You don't belong here. You're a fraud, and you will leave." The words echoed against the walls. Some gasped. Others shook their heads. The woman in pearls muttered, "Disgusting." The boy in the hoodie raised his phone higher, catching every syllable. But Callahan wasn't finished. "You think sitting here makes you powerful? It doesn't. This isn't your world. It's ours." He spread his hand toward the room as though he owned the marble, the lights, the people in it. Daniela didn't move. Her orange dress glowed against the gray backdrop, a flame refusing to die. Her gaze didn't lift, didn't lower, just locked on him, steady, like stone daring storm. The silence tightened the room. Even the toddler in the corner stopped fussing, sensing the shift. Then the man in the gray suit saw his chance, siding with power. "Exactly," he sneered, nodding toward Callahan. "She's wasting everyone's time. Security should have dragged her out already." Callahan's lips curved again. "Don't worry, they will." He turned to the manager, voice snapping like glass. "Call them, now." The manager obeyed, lifting the desk phone with shaking hands. The ring of the line carried through the lobby like a countdown. But in the crowd, voices rose. "This isn't right," she shouted. "Why are they treating her like this?" A man in a navy blazer finally shouted, Enough! She hasn't done anything! We're all watching! The manager pressed the phone harder to his ear, ignoring the protest. Callahan, however, only straightened his tie again, eyes fixed on Danielle. "You hear that?" he said coldly. "They're not cheering for you, they're watching you fall." Danielle Hayes exhaled slowly, not in defeat, in patience, in calculation. Because while Callahan thought he was tightening control, the truth was slipping. The crowd was no longer quiet, and the louder he pressed, the clearer the injustice became. And Danielle, still silent, still steady, let the pressure build. Because she knew the breaking point was near, the glass doors at the front groaned open. 2 uniformed security guards entered, heavy boots thudding against marble, radios crackling on their belts. Every eye in the lobby turned. Callahan lifted his chin, authority rolling off him like smoke. "Remove her," he ordered. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The taller guard stepped forward first, broad shoulders cutting a path through the crowd. He didn't ask questions. He didn't check papers. He simply reached down and seized Danielle's collar, fingers knotting the orange fabric like rope. Gasps erupted. The Pearls woman shouted, "Don't touch her!" The boy in the hoodie cursed under his breath, his camera shaking as it caught everything. The guard yanked. Danielle's body shifted, the leather chair screeching against the floor. For a heartbeat, it looked as if she would be pulled clean from her seat. But she didn't resist. She didn't fight. She simply steadied herself, hands still folded in her lap, gaze fixed forward. And somehow, that calm was heavier than the hand gripping her. The second guard moved closer, grabbing her arm. "Ma'am, stand up now." His tone was rehearsed, sterile, the kind used for trespassers and thieves. "She's not a thief," someone shouted from the back. "She's a client," the trainee banker blurted, her voice trembling but audible this time. The manager snapped toward her. "One more word and you're out of a job." But the words didn't bury her testimony. They only amplified it. Danielle lifted her head, eyes sweeping the room, not with fear, not with panic, with calculation, with patience. Her silence said more than 1,000 protests. "Watch. Record. Remember." The Pearls woman raised her phone now, too. So did the man in the navy blazer. Dozens of screens tilted upward, a forest of cameras catching the scene. The taller guard tugged harder, her orange dress strained under his grip. But Danielle's posture remained unbroken, her body anchored to the chair as if the marble itself refused to let her go. The smirk on Callahan's lips deepened. "This is what happens when you don't know your place," he muttered, loud enough for half the room to hear. A ripple of outrage surged through the crowd. "This is violence. She hasn't done anything. This is discrimination, plain and simple." The guards ignored it. One tightened his hold, the other pressed a hand to his radio. "Control, we're escorting a non-compliant subject." Danielle's hands unfolded at last. Not to fight, not to push back, but to rest calmly on the arms of the chair, like a judge ready to render sentence. Her eyes flickered once to the cameras around her, then back to Callahan, and for the first time, a faint curve touched her lips, quiet, deliberate, unreadable. Because while they thought they were removing her, Danielle Hayes knew the truth. Every pull of that collar, every insult, every camera recording was building the case she had been waiting for. And when she chose to rise, it would not be as the woman they tried to drag out. It would be as the storm they could not contain. The guard's grip tightened. The chair jolted another inch across the marble, its legs shrieking against stone. For a moment, the scene looked like pure victory for Callahan, an unyielding woman dragged out like a trespasser. And then Danielle moved, not to resist, not to push him away, but to reach, with perfect calm, into the side pocket of her dress. Her fingers closed around a phone, sleek, black, matte. She lifted it with deliberate slowness, as if every motion was chosen, calculated, rehearsed. The guard barked, "Put that away." But she had already pressed the screen. A single line lit up glowing blue. Executive protocol. The lobby stilled. The boy in the hoodie whispered into his camera, "She's making a call." The Pearls woman leaned forward, eyes wide. Even the clerk at the desk froze mid-breath, her hands hovering above the keyboard. Danielle brought the phone to her ear. Her voice was low, steady, unshaken. "Activate protocol. Connect me with the board now." On the other end, a crisp female voice answered instantly. "Understood, Miss Hayes. Board is standing by." The words didn't echo just through the phone. They echoed through the air, because half the lobby had gone silent, straining to catch every syllable. The manager sputtered, face blanching. What? What board? Callahan's jaw twitched, his smirk faltering for the first time, but Danielle gave them nothing more. She stayed seated, phone at her ear, eyes steady. Log this moment. Document everything. I want timestamps on every second. The assistant's voice replied, logged and secure. The taller guard hesitated now, his grip loosening slightly. The weight of the cameras pressed in, the growing chorus of murmurs clawing at his confidence. But Callahan snapped, voice sharp, desperate. Don't stop. Remove her. Now. The guard looked at him, then back at Danielle. She hadn't moved. She hadn't fought. She had simply spoken into her phone like the entire room was already hers. And in a way it was. The Pearls woman said it first, loud enough for everyone to hear. She's not bluffing. Her words broke the tension like glass underfoot. The boy in the hoodie added, this is real. I heard her say bored. Others murmured agreement. Every voice chipped away at Callahan's authority. Danielle lowered the phone, not ending the call, just resting it in her palm. Her eyes lifted, calm as stone. Her voice clear enough for the entire lobby. You think this is your stage? It isn't. It's mine. The guard's hand slipped off her collar. The crowd erupted into whispers, and Callahan's smirk cracked into something closer to panic, because Danielle Hayes had made her first move, and everyone in the room knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the fall. The lobby had grown so tense it felt like the marble itself was listening. Dozens of phones glowed red with record lights. Security still loomed at Danielle's side, but their grip had faltered, uncertainty creeping into their eyes. And Danielle Hayes finally spoke this time, not to her assistant, not in whispers, but to the room. You want to know who I am? Her voice cut clean through the space, steady, deliberate, a blade sharpened by years of restraint. I am Danielle Hayes, CEO of Hayes Capital. Gasps rippled like shockwaves. The Pearls woman's hand flew to her mouth. The boy in the hoodie muttered, holy, before his voice cracked into silence. But Danielle didn't pose. She rose slowly, straightening the orange dress that had been wrinkled by the guard's hand. And as she stood, her presence seemed to fill the room twice over. My firm, she continued, eyes locked on Callahan, is scheduled to finalize a $900 million investment into this bank, this week. The words landed like thunder. Silence. Then chaos. Callahan's face drained of color. The manager nearly dropped the phone still clutched in his hand. The gray-suited heckler actually staggered back a step, his smirk gone. The clerk at the desk whispered, oh my God. The trainee banker's eyes widened with vindication. She had been right. The system had been right. And the crowd surged with murmurs. She's the investor? She owns Hayes Capital? $900 million? Danielle's gaze swept the room, calm but cutting. You accused me of fraud. You dragged me from my seat. You told me I didn't belong. Her tone stayed level, but every syllable carried the weight of truth. And all while I was about to bring nearly $1 billion into this institution. The guards released her at once, as if the very fabric of her dress burned. They stepped back, uncertain, their earlier confidence dissolved. Callahan tried to recover. This is a misunderstanding, he stammered. A mistake. Surely we can... But Danielle cut him off with a single gesture, her hand raised, palm flat. A silent order that silenced him more effectively than a shout ever could. No, she said. This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern. And today, it ends. The boy in the hoodie whispered into his phone. She just flipped the whole room. This is history. The Pearls woman nodded fiercely, tears stinging her eyes. Finally, someone with power had faced the same prejudice she had felt, and she wasn't backing down. Danielle turned back to the crowd, her voice softer now, but no less powerful. You wanted to see proof of belonging. Here it is. I don't just belong here. I am the reason this place stands at all. The room was no longer divided. It was united, every camera, every witness, every whisper pointing to one truth. Danielle Hayes had revealed herself, and the bank's walls had never felt smaller. The words still hung in the air. $900 million. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room began to unravel. The manager's hand shook so violently the phone slipped from his fingers, clattering across the desk. He scrambled to pick it up, stammering half-formed apologies. Miss Hayes, we didn't know. Beside him, the junior banker who had questioned her clothing stared at the floor, face flushed crimson. His lips mouthed something like, forgive me, but the sound never came. The two guards who had pulled at her collar stepped back further, hands falling awkwardly to their sides. One whispered to the other, "She's the investor." The other muttered back, "We're screwed." And then there was Callahan. The man who had marched in with silver tie and steel confidence now looked as if the marble beneath his feet had betrayed him. His smirk had vanished. His throat bobbed once, dry, desperate. "Miss Hayes, this is all a misunderstanding." The words sounded weaker each time he repeated them. The man in the gray suit, once loudest among the jeers, now backed toward the espresso bar. "No one told me she was—" he started, but the Pearls woman cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. "No one needed to tell you to treat her with respect." Applause broke out, not loud, but enough. A ripple of hands clapping, of voices rising. The tide had shifted. Phones lifted higher. Every angle caught. The boy in the hoodie whispered into his mic, "They mocked her. They dragged her. And she owns this room." The Navy blazer father with the toddler turned to Callahan. "My kid just saw you humiliate a woman worth more than this building. You'll never wash that off." Callahan's face crumpled. For the first time, his authority wasn't just challenged, it was gone. Danielle stood at the center, silent still. She hadn't moved since revealing her title, and she didn't need to. Her very presence was the storm. The others were only realizing they had already been swept inside it. The trainee banker finally found her voice, stepping forward from behind the desk. "I saw her name in the system," she said clearly, eyes burning. "You deleted it." "I watched." Gasps swept the room. The manager's face turned chalk white. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, the lie dying before it could escape. "Say it," someone shouted from the crowd. "Tell the truth." But the truth was already spilling out, in fragments of guilt, in the collapse of every false smile. Danielle's eyes swept across them all, guards, bankers, hecklers, then back to Callahan. Her silence was no longer patience. It was judgment. And judgment had a way of spreading, person by person, until a whole room understood exactly who had lost. The lobby was silent now, except for the dozens of phones capturing every second. Danielle Hayes lifted the phone still in her hand, pressed one button, and spoke with unshaken clarity. "Nia," she said evenly, "log this as formal misconduct. Effective, immediately suspend all individuals involved." On the other end, her assistant's voice came crisp and certain. "Understood, Miss Hayes. Executing now." The response carried through the air like a verdict. The manager gasped as his tablet on the desk went dark, the system logging him out mid-screen. The junior banker glanced at his badge as it flickered red. One of the guards pressed his radio, it buzzed twice, then cut out. The collapse wasn't noisy. It was precise. Credentials revoked, access revoked, status revoked. The audience saw it happen in real time, like watching dominoes fall. Callahan staggered forward, his silver tie suddenly feeling like a noose. "Miss Hayes, wait. You can't." But Danielle raised a hand, and his words died. Her voice came low, steady, every syllable measured. "You called me a fraud in a bank I was preparing to save. You dragged me out of a chair I was about to anchor with $900 million. You told me I didn't belong." She stepped closer, her heels clicking like gavel strikes. "And now you don't belong." The Pearls woman began to clap. Then the boy in the hoodie. Then the navy blazer father with the toddler. Applause spread like fire. Not wild, not chaotic steady, certain, undeniable. The gray-suited heckler tried to slip out toward the door. But whispers followed him. "There he goes. Caught on camera." Pathetic. Danielle didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Callahan and the others who had mocked her. This institution was about to secure the largest investment in its history. But prejudice has a cost, and today, you've paid it in full. Callahan's face crumbled, pale and desperate. "Miss Hayes, please. This can be repaired." "No," she cut him off, her voice slicing clean through his plea. "It cannot." She lifted her phone once more. "Nia, freeze the transaction. Hayes Capital will reconsider its partnerships. Effective immediately, Summit Financial is suspended from our investment pipeline." Gasps thundered through the lobby. $900 million gone in a sentence. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were witnessing justice. And justice, delivered quietly, landed heavier than any shout. The applause still echoed across the marble lobby, but Danielle Hayes didn't bask in it. She didn't bow, didn't smile, didn't ask for recognition. She simply stood there, calm as stone, her phone lowered at her side. The manager sagged against the desk, eyes hollow. The junior banker stared down at his badge, still blinking red. The guards had already stepped back, silent, their radios useless. And Callahan, once the tallest shadow in the room, looked smaller than anyone had ever seen him. The storm had broken, and it had left only wreckage in its path. Danielle turned slowly, scanning the room. Every camera pointed at her. Every eye followed. The Pearls woman clasped her hands, whispering, "Thank you." The boy in the hoodie whispered to his live stream, "This is what justice looks like." But Danielle said nothing. Not yet. She walked toward the glass doors, heels striking steady against the marble. Each step echoed like judgment. The crowd parted without a word, creating a path. No one dared stand in her way. At the threshold, she paused. For the first time since the ordeal began, she turned back. Her gaze swept across the bankers, the guards, the hecklers, and finally landed on Callahan. Her voice came quiet, but sharp enough to cut through every corner of the room. "I don't need a camera to prove what happened here. I am the evidence. And I am the result of your prejudice." The words fell heavy, not shouted, not repeated, just dropped like stone into still water, ripples spreading outward. The Pearls woman wiped at her eyes. The navy blazer father hugged his toddler closer. Even the heckler in the gray suit froze halfway to the door, unable to pretend he hadn't heard. And then Danielle Hayes turned, pushed open the glass doors, and stepped into the sunlight. Orange dress blazing against the cold gray sky, a flame walking away from the ashes it had left behind. The lobby remained still for a beat, as though frozen in her absence. Then voices rose angry, ashamed, inspired. The cameras kept rolling, but the story no longer needed them, because the story had already been written, and it ended with this truth. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks out the door in silence, leaving nothing behind but the undeniable weight of power.